Now this, my friends, is the true fight of the century. It's very rare to see two of the very best go at it, especially in their prime. On July 29th, Errol the Truth Spence Jr. and Terence Bud Crawford are finally going at it in a welterweight unification bout. Let's go ahead and first talk about the stats and the facts, then we'll move on and talk about their styles, and then we'll move on to their keys to victory, and then we'll end it off with my prediction for this welterweight showdown. Let's go ahead and talk about their records really quick here. Spence is 28-0 with 22 KOs, and he's been the unified WBC, WBA, and IBF champion since 2022. He unified the IBF and WBC titles against Sean Porter in 2019 and added the WBA belt against Yordenis Ugas in 2022. Crawford is 39-0 with 30 KOs, and he's been the WBO welterweight champion since 2018 after winning it against Jeff Horn. He was also the WBO lightweight champion in 2014 and the unified WBC, WBO, WBA, IBF, and Ring Magazine super lightweight champion in 2017. Both of them are incredibly powerful fighters, holding a nearly identical KO percentage. Spence sitting at 78.5%, while Bud is just under 77%. Now let's talk about their physicalities here. Spence is 5'9.5", Crawford is 5'8". Spence has a 72-inch reach, while Crawford has a 74-inch reach. Since Spence has a 1.5-inch height advantage and Crawford has a 2-inch reach advantage, they're effectively the same size. However, we need to note that Spence is a physically bigger individual. He's been sitting at welterweight for much longer than Crawford has, and that, my friends, is something that we need to look out for. Terence is coming in 2 years older than Errol Spence being 33 to Crawford's 35. I don't really see that as being a significant factor in this fight. Both of them are pretty much in their primes. One fact I do have to mention is Errol Spence's near-fatal car accident in 2019 and his second accident in 2022. He had some serious facial injuries and a leg injury in the second accident. I personally don't know if this is going to affect him in this fight. It might not seem like it, but only the fight will tell. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Let's go ahead and talk about their common opponents, starting with former IBF champion Kell Brook. Starting off with Spence, he fought Brook back in 2017, where he broke him down in a slow, methodical way. In this bout, we really witnessed Spence's unrelenting, continuous forward pressure. Spence stayed competitive early and slowly took over the middle rounds until Brook took a knee in the 11th after fracturing his left eye socket. Overall, it was a masterful and dominant performance. Now let's go ahead and take a look at Crawford. On paper, Crawford put Brook away pretty early, scoring a TKO victory in the 4th back in 2020. Now if you actually went ahead and watched the fight, you'll notice something that Spence can exploit. Crawford is a slow starter. Historically, Crawford's always been a slow starter. He takes the first few rounds to observe his opponents and usually picks things up after the 3rd. Which is why you'll notice that most of his KOs and TKOs come at the 3rd round or after the 3rd round. I'll explain how Spence can take advantage of this later on in the video. Although we had a slow start, Crawford managed to catch Brook and put him away. Overall, both of them took care of Brook in their own respective ways. The only other opponent that they have in common is Showtime Sean Porter. Starting with Spence, him and Porter went a full 12 rounds in a Fight of the Year contender. Spence took the early rounds, staying behind the jab, while Porter took the late rounds using his controlled aggression and his work on the inside. However, Spence took the late rounds, knocking down Porter in the 11th, earning him a hard-fought split decision victory. I personally scored that fight 114-113 for Spence. Now on to Crawford. The pattern pops up once again. Crawford started slow. Porter ended up taking some of the early rounds. Overall, it was a close firefight throughout the whole fight. Unfortunately, Porter got knocked down twice in the 10th, and his quarter ended up stopping the fight. Now, on paper, you could say that Crawford TKO'd Porter, while Spence only had a decision. So therefore Crawford is better, but that couldn't be further from the truth. We need to acknowledge the fact that Porter dragged both of them into deep waters, made them really uncomfortable. Final scoring before the TKO was 86-85 on 2 of the judges' scorecards. This was a very hard-fought victory as well. To summarize, both of them had to dig deep to overcome Showtime Sean Porter. Now let's go ahead and take a look at their styles. Both of them are boxer punchers, and for those of you who don't know what a boxer puncher is, a boxer puncher is a jack of all trades. They've got the footwork, they've got the power, they've got the speed, the technique, the defense, They have essentially everything. Both of them are great at adapting to whatever situation they're in, and they're both great on the front foot and great on the back foot. It is worth noting two key differences in their styles. Errol Spence is a volume puncher. He essentially throws more punches than Crawford. Spence threw 20 more punches per round than Crawford in their last 5 fights, Spence at 64.2 per round, while 45.7 per round for Crawford, the welterweight average being 56.7. The second key difference is that Crawford is actually a switch hitter. That means Crawford is able to switch from orthodox stance to southpaw stance. Will that be a significant factor in this fight? We don't really know, but it's worth noting that Spence is also a southpaw. But having that sort of versatility to switch stances is an asset in itself. How in the world are they supposed to beat each other? Let's break down their keys to victory, starting with Spence. First key to victory is to start early. Like I mentioned before, Crawford is historically a slow starter. You can look back at any of his fights, the first 3 rounds, Crawford isn't really doing much. I don't see either guy knocking each other out, so I have a strong feeling this will go the distance. Bagging those early rounds could be the difference between winning and losing for Spence. He has to apply pressure early and take those first few rounds away from Crawford. His second key to victory is to employ the jab. Spence has a great jab, he really needs to use it in this fight. I'm expecting Crawford to go on the front foot in the middle rounds, and Spence needs to use that jab to keep him off of him. Crawford has always had trouble getting on the inside against opponents with good jabs. I believe Spence can really capitalize on that fact and control Crawford's offense. His last key to victory is to try to outpunch Crawford. Crawford is very selective with his punches. He threw 33% less punches than Spence when you compare their last 5 fights. Spence should attempt to outwork Crawford in punch volume. This will lead to a better score on the judges' scorecards. To recap, he has to apply pressure early and take those early rounds. He has to use that jab to keep Crawford under control and outwork him by throwing more. Now let's go ahead and talk about Crawford's keys to victory. His first key to victory is to find openings. Spence has tight defense. When he isn't punching, he's defending. He's got a very solid high guard. Crawford either has to make those openings himself or catch Spence during exchanges. Punching Spence in a defensive posture won't be as effective as you think. He needs to get into those openings, get on the inside, and capitalize on them. His second key to victory is to make Spence uncomfortable. Roughhouse him, smother him, doesn't matter how, he just needs to be in an uncomfortable spot. Spence excels the most when he isn't under constant pressure and when he's comfortable. Crawford really needs to drag him into deeper waters, which leads me to my third point. Go to the body. Body punching is key against high stamina fighters like Spence. Spence doesn't normally take body shots, especially in his last few fights. Taking those hits to the body will put him into an uncomfortable spot and will slow him down in later rounds. Remember, body shots pay dividends. Spence is known to keep his power and mobility throughout the late rounds, so those body shots will help nullify that. To recap, Crawford has to find openings and capitalize on them. He has to make Spence as uncomfortable as possible and make sure he attacks the body. Now on to my prediction. To be completely honest, I don't know who to pick. I really don't know who to side with here. Writing this script took me forever because I couldn't figure out who I would have to side with. Both of them are strong, they're fast, they're smart, they're both technically sound. They've been so dominant against the elite for so long, and they're literally the best welterweights we have so far. However, with that being said, if someone had a gun to my head and told me to pick, I'd have to go with the truth, Errol Spence Jr. I think if Spence fights smart and keeps that pressure on early, he could come out on top with a win over the welterweight boogeyman, Terence Crawford. In the end, the winner will be crowned the undisputed king of the welterweight division. If you disagree with me, let us know why down in the comments below. I'd love to have a conversation with you. That's going to be all from me. Before you click off, if you liked the video, be sure to hit that like button. And if you want to see more breakdowns like these, be sure to hit the subscribe button. The fight takes place on July 29th. Don't miss it. Thank you so much for watching. And this has been Gino's Fight Corner.